So Jonnu Smith was one of the pieces that the Atlanta Falcons picked up in a trade. And he's obviously a tight end. And, he had time with Arthur Smith. Now, with Jonnu Smith in the fold, and obviously Parker Hesse and some of these guys, whatever, but with Jonnu Smith in the fold, he is definitely a get down the field, can catch the football, only had 2 drops, on 27 receptions last year. He is definitely a guy who can stretch the field. Now, he didn't do as much of that last year, but he has had years where he's been 12, almost 13 yards per reception. So he can get some yardage, chunks of yardage. But the question becomes this. With a Jonnu Smith, who's played in Arthur Smith's offensive system and did really good things in Tennessee, and certainly he was a guy that Arthur Smith was able to maximize, and Jonnu Smith has said nothing but really good things about Arthur Smith being here in Atlanta. He wants to be an Atlanta Falcon because he flourished under Arthur Smith's offense in Tennessee. But it does raise the question, could we see Kyle Pitts slide out and potentially become a number 2 wide receiver? So if you have Drake London on one outside wide receiver, you've got Jonnu Smith lined up at your tight end position. Could you see Kyle Pitts slide out? Could he eventually take advantage of his athleticism, his speed, his catch, all the different things about, because again, if we're talking about a true unicorn, right? A true unicorn, I could see this very much happening with Kyle Pitts. I very much could see that he plays more wide receiver than he is as far as a tight end. And look, when you have that size, speed, combination of everything, you definitely want to do some different things with a Kyle Pitts. But Jonnu Smith is a guy that maybe allows this Falcons offense to do some different things with him. I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think that, honestly, if you're splitting Kyle Pitts out wide, I don't think that's a bad idea to put him out there and maybe make a mismatch on a corner. Take his size and speed and ability to catch and line him up against a corner and say, okay, here we go. We're going to throw the ball up to you. And again, you could get Jonnu to track downfield and come down the seam over the middle of the field. You could do some different things with him. But I would be very much intrigued by the idea of Kyle Pitts splitting out wide and using his athleticism to see what he can do. Because at some point, and we've talked about this in the past, I think just a month or two ago, we've talked about, look, we got to have Kyle Pitts have a breakout kind of year. Well, it's 1,000 yards. Okay, 1,026 yards is not a breakout year. I'm talking about 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns. I'm talking about that high caliber. Again, Jamar Chase level numbers, Travis Kelce level numbers, where you're 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns. Are we going to throw it a whole bunch? Are we going to throw it 600 times like Matt Ryan did? No. But he still has to have that kind of production. And I would be very intrigued about the idea of putting him out wide and seeing what he could do. And especially when you get into the red zone. Yeah, I know everybody talks about, well, they double team Kyle, but every high caliber player at wide receiver, tight end gets double teamed. But you saw in the Super Bowl, okay, when you have a play caller like Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid, you see when those guys come together, the play calling in the Super Bowl, right? You saw guys wide open. You saw Kelce break free and catch that first touchdown pass and find himself open. You can scheme your way to some of these things. You can get guys open. If you're good offensive mind, you can get guys open. And Arthur Smith, I do believe, is one of those kinds of guys. I do believe that he's a really good offensive mind and he's got a good high football IQ. So if you split him out wide, there's no doubt that he could become a different kind of player in a different kind of role. And I would think that Kyle Pitts wouldn't mind being more of a wide receiver because, those guys get paid a lot more dollars than, say, your average tight end. But whatever it is, okay, Jonnu Smith is tight end. We split Kyle Pitts out. Whatever the scheme ends up being and the player personnel on the field ends up being, we have to get Kyle Pitts more involved in our offense, in our red zone. There's no doubt about it that we need him to be a 100-catch, 1,400-yard, 10-touchdown kind of player. Like guys that are pass catchers that, are drafted number 4 overall should be. And I don't care if he's a tight end, he's a wide receiver. Look, you can, if you want to call him a halfback, or whatever. I don't care what name you put on his position. WR2, TE, HB, whatever you want to put on it. But I am intrigued by the idea of getting him out wide and seeing if we can use his speed, his size, his catch radius, and get him out into some space where he can run past some people, he can maybe run over some people, and find a way to use his athleticism and use his big-time catch radius, and especially when we get down in the red zone. I would be very intrigued by Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, and seeing how much, and listen, even Cordero Patterson, Tyler Algier, this could really be a really good offensive potential. Arthur Smith, I do believe, is a guy that can find a way to maximize the talent. And as I said, Jonnu Smith was a guy who really wanted to be here. He had all of his best years under Arthur Smith. It's no coincidence that he certainly wanted to be in Atlanta, and he had nothing but glowing things to say about Arthur. But I would be intrigued if Kyle Pitts splits out wide and he finds himself at wide receiver 2. All right, after you make Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day, make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on Odyssey, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get all of your podcasts from.